Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime spree in history. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process. He'll talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou is dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, Chicago. I'm Lou Brydges, and my wingman, Mike Main.
Hello, Chicagoland.
And our producer, Debbie Schreiber, for the beautiful Saturday morning. This show, which is the second show after the 5-year anniversary of the onslaught or the beginning of the financial crisis and the caused by the major banks and the selling and bundling and packaging mortgage-backed securities, it's getting more and more is coming out. The truth is coming out as we knew it eventually would. And when we get to the news segment, you'll see it's hard to keep up. We're going to have to double the time of the show just to keep up on all the developments. J.P. Morgan legal hurdles expected to multiply. J.P. Morgan last week paid $1 billion in 1 week to resolve an array of government investigations into its unlawful activities. But its biggest battles with the federal authorities may lie ahead. And even more important is the people. You see, J.P. Morgan, along with Bank of America and Wells Fargo and Citi and U.S. Bank and Deutsche Bank, the major banks have been wrongfully foreclosing. They have been foreclosing as supposedly as the servicer. 4 million foreclosures. The own independent foreclosure review shows that the vast majority of these were based on fraudulent documents, forged documents, robo-signed documents, and the big gorilla in the room, the failed securitization. We're not saying a mortgage and note don't exist. We're not saying the homeowner doesn't owe a fair amount. But when you artificially inflate the cost of American real estate by 100%, 131% over a 10-year period because you can control the market. You see, this is what Thomas Jefferson warned us about. When banks get into things other than banking, and they were allowed to do that in 1996 when we repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, the way things have been done for 200 years were all of a sudden changed. Banks can not only be in banking, but they can be involved in bundling and packaging mortgage-backed securities. They can be involved in investing. And now everybody, within 20 years, they're involved in manipulating energy prices by controlling
hoarding and controlling the resources,
and in the mortgage-backed security fiasco, in which they can artificially control the market. You can artificially inflate the market and deflate it. They artificially ran up the cost of American residential real estate by 131% because they're bundling and packaging mortgage-backed securities. They're loaning other people money, and they're getting the percentage for the commission for bundling and packaging it, and then they're getting the servicing for it. And when you multiply, there's 56 million, give or take a few, residential mortgages in the country. When you artificially inflate the cost of the homes by 131%, so that the $100,000 home in 1998 cost $231,000 in 2008, that creates the illusion of $5.5 trillion of capital that doesn't exist. So you bundle and package that for $5.5 trillion more, and it all comes down to getting the homeowner's signature on a note of mortgage, which is why there was such widespread fraud in the inducement, unlawful inducement, failures to disclose information. And then they're selling these. They've already raised the money by selling them, and then they keep the servicing, and the service fees that they've put in these pooling and service agreements are 30 times more to be servicing a mortgage in default. So when you multiply that times, say, Wells Fargo services 7 million mortgages. If 7 million mortgages are performing, they're charging maybe $10 per mortgage, $70 million a month. Nice little chunk of change for opening the envelope, processing the check, taking care of the bounce checks, and doing what a bank is supposed to do. But when you have 1 million of those 7 million, 14% in foreclosure, they charge $300 a month for those. That's 300 million on just that 1 million and 60 million on the other 6. So now you've gone from 70 million to 360 million, a difference of $290 million, 300 million. Times 12 months is $3.6 billion more for servicing if just 14% of these mortgages are in foreclosure. And there's a lot more than that are in foreclosure. It's more like about 40%. Thomas Jefferson warned us. He said that banking institutions have the potential to be far more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them, their subsidiaries that they control, will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And that is what is happening, people, and that's why we have this show, because there's a growing movement around the country. Well, I'm not alone. You check StopForeclosureFraud.com, Living Lies, you follow the work of Senator Elizabeth Warren, you read the books being written by Sheila Bair, Michael Lewis, that wrote The Big Short. You see the movie Inside Job. And this past week, J.P. Morgan legal hurdles expected. Inquiries against J.P. Morgan increase. U.S. government to sue J.P. Morgan in mortgage cases over wrongfully foreclosing. Not just the investors thought they were getting more, but they weren't getting mortgage-backed securities because they're not mortgage-backed because there was a failed securitization. Department of Justice prepares to sue J.P. Morgan over mortgage bonds. And we're going to talk in this show about the effect this is having on us as a people, primarily the children. Sheila Bair, who wrote Bull by the Horns, one of the first, came 2010, one of the first books about exposing all the criminal activity of the mortgage industry, primarily the mortgage banks and the banks that service mortgages and the Wall Street investment banks that were bundling and packaging these mortgages and all the, buying the credit default swaps, betting against the own thing, the same thing they were selling to investors, betting that there would be an unusual number of failures because they created mortgages with an unusual number of failures. In a nutshell, there's a thing called tranches. You have mortgage-backed securities. You got one good mortgage. If you got 7 bad ones, you can get the thing paper rated AAA because the good one is included in it. It's very complicated, and you can't cover it all in a radio show. So I'm going to go, in general terms, try to spread the truth. The children of this country are who is suffering the most. There has been 4 million foreclosures in the past 2 years. There's probably going to be another 2 to 3 million, or as many as estimates are 5 million. And there's 20 million American families that are underwater. That is, they owe more on the mortgage than the home is worth. Now, you may say, well, they made a bad investment or they made a bad decision. No, the price of the home was artificially inflated. These major banks were controlling the mortgage underwriters, the appraisers, and the real estate brokers are going along because their commissions are higher. The appraisers are overappraising the property because when you have 2,500 mortgages in a mortgage-backed security, if the average price of the homes in there is $200,000, well, that's $500 million. 2,500 times $200,000 is $500 million. 1% commission is $50 million or $5 million. If you've got the average homes are $300,000, those 2,500 mortgages are so over $750 million. 1% is $7.5 million. That's a difference of $2.5 million. And these mortgage-backed securities, you're bundling and packaging 2 and 3 a day if you're Goldman Sachs or on Wall Street. So you're making you're making $5 to $10 million more per day just in the commissions. And then there's the servicing. But Sheila Bair is writing a book now. She wrote Bull by the Horns in 2010. And the book she's writing now is examining the impact that this is having on us as a people. 4 million families with how many, kids? If, say 3 million of those had children and they had an average of
1.75 or something.
Wrongfully taken out of their schools and taken out of their communities and broken families. And, you go down to King County, Florida, and the school buses go down Motel Row, and you've got entire subdivisions that are vacant, that are deteriorating, and, that have been foreclosed on, that these where these people used to live. And it's just humongous what is going on and the changes that are going to result from this and the impact this is going to have. What do you expect? It's the largest transfer of wealth in human history over the 10-year period from 1998 to 2008. And it's got to the point now there is a greater concentration of wealth among a smaller number of people in the United States than ever before in history. We're becoming a Venezuela where you've got a very, very elite, 1/10 of 1% that have 99%. Well, in our country, 1% of the people have something like 95% of the money or 99.
2 or 3, I think. 92 or 3.
92 or 3% of the money is held by 1% of the people, and the other 8% of the money is held by the other 99%. So you've got a very, very upper-class elite, and then you've got a mass number of people that you're eliminating the middle class. And that is going to lead to some really serious social problems and upheaval. And that's why we have this show, is because we ought to spread the truth about this.
Join the discussion at facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show. You know, this past week, I got a call from an old mentor, colleague, friend of mine from when the old days. When I got out of law school, I'm not going to give you his name other than his middle name, because then those of us who listen who know him, Larrabee, called me. Larrabee was, when I got out of law school in 1980, I went to work for a downtown Chicago law firm. Some would call it a silk stocking firm, a boutique firm, whatever. It was, suit and tie every day, and was, very prosperous and doing very well. And Larrabee was one of the senior associates, junior partners in the firm. So he was, my first level of mentor was Irv, who was like about a 4 or 5 year associate. And so I worked under him. But Larrabee was also a guy I looked up to a lot. And he was a regular guy, which was, there weren't a lot of those in that environment. But he was a regular guy and also a brilliant attorney. And over the years, that firm, I left that firm and went on, and our careers diverged, and we kind of lost touch. But, every so often, sometimes it'd be like 5, almost 10 years. He'd call me up, ask me a question, or I'd call him, ask a question, or he'd refer a case to me or something. And so he called me this past week, and I hadn't heard from him for about 10 years, and told him I had a radio show. He said, yeah, I listened to the show. It's really great. I've been following it. You're doing, a very good job. And then he gave me some very constructive advice. And I thank you for that, Larrabee. One of the things he says, you should tell people your story, how you got to be what you're doing. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to bore you for a minute, maybe. I was, started out as a labor law attorney, was representing management for the silk stocking firm, and got involved in a little bit of litigation. And then I went to another firm, and I did a lot of insurance defense. So it was very litigation intensive, in courtrooms all the day, all day long, every day. And for the most part, either that or taking depositions or doing discovery or things of that nature. And, in England, they divide barristers and solicitors. I was what you would call in England a barrister in court all the time. And then I got into construction and was a construction lawyer. And then I left the practice in early 2000. I took about 2 years off and went to Costa Rica and did some things down there that didn't turn out to be as successful as I had hoped in terms of business. And I had spent pretty much my life savings and retirement. So I came back to work in around 2005 and started up a little boutique, just myself really, and a secretary, and then I took on a senior, sort of a senior attorney who I worked with before, and we concentrated in construction law, mechanics lien, which is in Chancery Court, and I represented a few construction clients, and mostly commercial construction, a few home builders and the like. And everything's going along fine. I got, my office is in my home. I got a nice home. A whole separate wing is the office is, and practice out of there, and have a few select clients, and, not making a lot of money, but not spending a lot of money either. So I was, just enough. I was comfortable and had everything I needed. And then in 2008, the business started to slow off. And in 2009, it pretty much dropped off the table. I had nothing. Construction came to a complete standstill. And any of you who are construction workers out there, you know what I'm talking about. There was no work. And I don't mean a little work. I mean no work. My billings went down to 1/3 of my costs. And 2010 started out, and it wasn't any better. The only business I had was some former construction industry clients that had big houses and some cold construction workers that I gotten to know who had been laid off for a couple of years, and they were in foreclosure, and they were asking, if I could help them and just buy them some time. And I started looking at the notes and the mortgages and the servicing bank that was that didn't own the note or mortgage, that was actually just filing, which you can do because the servicer, they have the authority to file suit to foreclose. But I started looking at this stuff and I'm saying, wait a minute, this isn't right. They don't have the proof of this. And I started filing some motions and started filing some discovery and started filing some, affirmative defenses. And I developed this whole situation where, if you pay $750 a month, I'll defend you in the foreclosure case, and you'll stay in the house because the bank can't prove the foreclosure. And eventually, hopefully, we'll negotiate because of settlement. Because you're not going to get the house free and clear of a mortgage, although we have gotten several people's homes free and clear of a mortgage because the bank's so screwed up. But don't count on that. And that ain't right either. But we were starting getting the banks to agree to modify and get restructuring, and not just modifications, but restructurings, reducing the principal balance to reflect the true fair market value of the property, and working with people until they get back on their feet, get a job, and start catching up. And 5 clients I had that were paying $750 a month. All 5 of them are still in their homes to this day. And then I read an article by Terry Savage about this outfit Foreclosure Defense Group, which I wasn't associated with, but I saw where they were. I thought it was a group of lawyers. It turned out it's a long story, but they were doing the same thing. They were representing people in foreclosure, charging $750 a month. And and then I found out that this was kind of patterned after a couple of lawyers in Florida that had also found major, and I mean major, flaws in the origination of the mortgage and the securitization of the mortgage. And that's Stop Foreclosure Fraud. That's Jeff Barnes and Neil Garfeld and Tom Ice down there in Florida. So I started going into this, and then I met a lawyer who's I'm not with anymore, but his name remained nameless. But I did a lot of studying on my own, and I found out, you know what? There are major, major flaws in this. They do not have the right to foreclose. They are the servicing bank. The party for whom they're servicing this mortgage did not acquire the note and mortgage in accordance with our Illinois Conveyances Act, our Recorders Act, the Notary Act. They transferred the note and mortgage were separated. They don't have the original note. They don't have an assignment of the mortgage, and all they had was a copy of the note and mortgage given to a Countrywide or a Washington Mutual, and the judges were allowing them to foreclose on that. And I said, wait a minute, that ain't right. You got to prove that you have this. And so then the bank started calling me to settle the cases. And anyway, so I developed this program where with paralegals and associate attorneys, paralegals applying for modification and restructuring while we're defending the foreclosure lawsuit, while we're filing affirmative defenses, the investigators that do the research to find out through the Bloomberg terminal, all the securitization, built this whole system where you charge people $750 a month. And then a single mom came in and said she couldn't afford $750 a month. And it occurred to me, you know what? I got to this position because my whole life's been leading up to this. And it's not here for me to get rich off of other people's misfortune and misery. I'm here because I'm doing something important, and I feel better than I have any time in my life because I'm now using my talents and skills and abilities to help other people. Now, I'm either going to make money doing that or I'm not. But it really doesn't matter because if I don't make money and I've been using all my talents and skills and opportunities and blessings and good fortune and everything to help other people, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because I'll always have that going for me. And I'm not saying I don't like to have, I bought myself a new bike. BMW 1200 RT. Actually, it was a used bike because you could get a used one for a lot cheaper. I got about half price. And
nice bike.
I've indulged myself. I have a personal trainer 4 days a week now. Bill, who's at Miller at Lifetime, who's a great personal trainer, and I've got myself in great shape. Well, pretty good shape, you would say. I still got a gut. But the whole point is that there's always something good that can come from a bad. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are suffering misfortune and misery, and there's a lot of kids that are being displaced from their from their schools and their homes and everything. But the thing is these banks, it's all based on lies. It's all based on fraud and lies and deceit, and that's all coming out. And so maybe Thomas Jefferson's prophecy, because the American people are getting wind of this, and that people like Eric Snyderman, Elizabeth Warren, and all around the country. So I'll read again. Thomas Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control, because since Glass-Steagall was repealed in 1996, within less than 20 years, they have committed so much fraud and so many crimes. The newspapers are just chock full of them. And now the big gorilla hasn't even come out yet. I'm telling you, what's going to come out in the next couple of years is really going to blow your socks away. J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citi, U.S. Bank, and Deutsche Bank have wrongfully dispossessed over 4 million Americans of their homes based on fraud upon the court. Now, the judiciary at first was very, reluctant to hear what we had to say. An old judge said to me, Mr. Brydges, you've been appearing before me for 20 years. It's a note. It's a mortgage. They didn't pay the note. They lose the house. Where's the issue here? It's not that simple, Judge. And the judges all around, with the exception, of course, of Cook County, started to listen, and they started to look into this. And you know what? You got some points there. And they started to see that, you know what? It wasn't 56. This couldn't come about because 56 million American families woke up one morning and decided to commit bank fraud that day. No, 56 million American families were the victim of bank fraud. The biggest financial crime spree in history perpetrated by the major banks and Wall Street investment banks. And the truth is coming out. And now there's going to be some changes.
Join the discussion at facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show.
That's
Brydges with a Y.
Town.
Louis Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Well, welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show. I'm going to give some shout out. We had an event here at WIND this past week. Dennis Miller came into town, and I got to meet him. Just a really, not only one of the best comedians of all time, in my view. I've been watching Dennis Miller since late 70s, early 80s when he was first started on Saturday Night Live. And I told him, I said, you're better than ever. I've been watching you for years. You're better than ever. And he really is. And also a great guy. Been married to the same woman for 25 years. His 2 kids. He talked about his kids, he almost teared up and everything. And he's just a really good guy. And a great comedian, and just very smart and clever, and he cares. A lot of his humor is very cynical and stuff, but I'll tell you something, you could just tell this is a guy who really, really cares.
And he gets it, and he's got a sharp.
I encourage you all to listen to him, and I understand that he and Riley do tours now, with Bill O'Reilly.
Yes.
And I also want to shout out to my partner, Scotto. I never mentioned my partner, Scotto. Let me tell you something. I saw Scotto in court one time, and before I knew him. And this guy, I said, this guy is like this. He's one of the 2 smartest attorneys in this courtroom. And he just has a way about him, and he's so meticulous and so into it. And he's got the passion that I have. And he's also a little more detail oriented than I am. So we're a great team, and he's a great student of the law. And and he's my partner. So it's Brydges & O and Associates. We don't ever leave out the associates. That's why the firm name is Brydges & O, because it's myself, Lou Brydges, and Scott O. That's O-H. He's Korean, Korean-American. And then the associates, because we involve a lot of paralegals and clerks and people that communication specialists, intake personnel,
associate attorneys,
and paralegals because we have a broad front approach. But this show is not about the firm; it's about the truth. I want to shout out to at that event we had a little booth with some of our flyers and stuff, and a lot of the listeners came by. I couldn't believe how many listeners we actually have. I thought we only had about 10 listeners, but turns out we have at least 15 or 20 even, and. Ryan from Alamogordo, Florida, New Mexico, where they set off the atomic bomb. He doesn't seem to have suffered too much from the radioactive fallout. And Ryan and the others at the Army Recruiting Office in Palatine, Humberto Garcia from Meadowdale Performance Garage, and we'll name a few of these others. Jimmy Costa. We had a lot of people come by, and we have a lot more than 20 minutes. It turns out we may have actually in the hundreds of listeners. But whatever, we're doing our little part to spread the truth about these banks. And there's going to be some changes in this country because I think there's a lot more coming out. But it requires, you see, the issue is very complex. So let me simplify it for you. The major banks, not the community banks, but the major banks in this country are screwing you. And they're screwing the American public in massive. I mean, not just a little bit, a lot. We're going to start going after them because, as it turns out, they have wrongfully foreclosed. This failed securitization issue that's catching hold in Supreme Courts, state Supreme Courts around the land. Deutsche Bank, South Carolina court holds that the foreclosure laws apply, and the bank must show that they own the note or mortgage, and they did not acquire the note and mortgage in accordance with the pooling and service agreement, which means they don't own the note and mortgage, which means that Deutsche is not the servicer for the entity that does own the mortgager, because they claim authority based on the pooling and service agreement to be this servicer. Well, guess what? If you didn't acquire the mortgage, then you're a servicer for an entity that doesn't own the note and mortgage. That means you've been wrongfully foreclosing. That means you've been collecting debt from people that you have no authority to collect. So not only would we like our money back, but there's this two statutes called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and the Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act. You damage people's credit rating attempting to collect a debt that you had no authority to collect. That's why Jamie Dimon put aside this week, according to the New York Times and announcements, $8 billion for expected liabilities. These banks, they're not dumb. They have, they know that they have screwed up big time. And people like Eric Schneiderman are onto it. And here, the Maine Supreme Court, and now you've got all these cases out of Arizona, the Phoenix Light, where the investors are suing them, basically saying, hey, you told us you were giving us mortgage-backed securities. The mortgage wasn't transferred into the trust in accordance with the pooling and service agreement, which means it wasn't transferred into the trust under New York trust law. It's a void purported transfer, which means that you did not sell us mortgage-backed securities. And and so the investors are so. Excuse me, I had something caught in my throat there. I get so excited about this. What case is this? I'm not going to go through all the news. I can't possibly go through all the news. It would take the entire show.
But the investors are the ones that are actually out there suing the banks right now, which is a big turn of events.
Okay, Chavez versus IndyMac Mortgage, wrongful foreclosure, equitable estoppel, unjust enrichment, HAMP abuse out of the California Supreme Court.
And you'll find a lot of these listed at our Facebook page, which is facebook.com.
The Office of Controller of the Currency is taking action against JP Morgan Chase to protect consumers and ensure service members receive credit protections.
Which is facebook.com/the Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y. Come join the discussion, please.
The embarrassing double-dipping, pocketing bank foreclosure complaints conceal that the pooling and service agreement trust paid the defaulted mortgages. U.S. Bank versus Rodriguez. U.S. Bank and Wells Fargo slammed for not following HAMP guidelines. U.S. Bank National plaintiff submissions of attorney affirmations affidavits failed to show that U.S. Bank owned the mortgage.
And you're not even halfway through your list.
This is the past week, people. If you're in foreclosure...
We now return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
Welcome back, folks. That's greatest financial crime spree in history that continues to this day in various forms, including fraud upon the courts. And the judiciary is finally, with the exception, of course, of Cook County, finally becoming responsive to the valid legal arguments. In Cook County, we have so even some judges. There's some new judges in Cook County on the 28th floor that are starting to get it. And but what they're starting to get is that there's probably been over 100,000 Cook County residents wrongfully foreclosed upon. Most of those homes are still empty, and the people's families are broken up, and the kids are taken out of their schools and probably joining gangs and things. And but I tell you what. When it comes, I'm not going to go any further on that. Let me just read to you something from CNN Money. Sheila Bair. Sheila Bair was onto this from the very start. Brilliant woman. She was former chairman of the FDIC, and she warned about the repeal of Glass-Steagall and the consequences. And she's not out there saying, I told you so, I told you so. Not at all. Not at all. She could be, but she's not. Instead, she's writing, she wrote Bull by the Horns in 2010. Now she's writing a book about the plight of the Americans that were hurt most by the largely forgotten in the power politics that have overcome financial reform. She writes in Fortune magazine, I guess it was, reported in CNN. She says, I told myself I wasn't going to do a Lehman Brothers column, given the media frenzy over this month's 5-year anniversary of that institution's bankruptcy. But in researching a new book I am writing for young adults about the 2008 financial crisis, I have been uncomfortably reminded of the hardships so many families encountered because of the crisis, particularly the kids. Their plight has been largely forgotten in the power politics that have overcome financial reform. It's all about winners and losers, which, with regulators and reform advocates pitted against powerful industry lobbying machine oiled by political money and the grease of revolving door jobs. The objective of protecting the public from another recession brought on by an unstable financial sector seems lost in the Washington shuffle. So let me recount the heartbreaking memories of the families I have interviewed. They bear tragic similarities, and I've seen all these stories. Their problems usually start with a steeply resetting mortgage payment or a job loss or cutback, frequently combined with an unexpected health problems not covered by insurance. Whatever the catalyst, it is almost always followed by high levels of stress for the family, sleepless nights for the parents and kids, deteriorating grades at school, lost hope as savings are depleted, and finally the loss of the home. The kids give up their rooms, their pets, their schools, their neighborhood, and will always live with the traumatic memories of the forced dislocation. To be sure, many of the parents I've interviewed bear some responsibility for their troubles. As home prices escalated, they repeatedly refinanced their homes to pull out cash. Well, of course, that's what Wall Street was telling you should do, and you could do, and who wouldn't? When the housing market turned, they were left with unaffordable mortgage debt, which far exceeded the value of their homes. But these cash-out refis were not always done to pay for fancy vacations or flat-screen TVs, as apologists for Wall Street would have you believe. Rather, more typically, the money was used to pay college tuition, medical bills, or simply to help make ends meet. Several of the families I interviewed never participated in the housing craze. They had a traditional 30-year fixed-rate mortgage that they could no longer pay when they lost their job or suffered pay cuts as a result of the financial meltdown caused by Wall Street. They did nothing wrong except live in a country where we temporarily deluded ourselves into thinking that a self-regulating financial sector tethered to a housing asset bubble could provide a solid foundation for prosperity. These families are now clawing their way back. Many are living in apartments or Spartan rental homes or tent cities in Florida. Many have regained employment, but at significantly lower wages. Several have managed to start rebuilding their savings. Their kids have grown to accept getting by with less. Some have foregone college as their parents depleted their college accounts in a desperate attempt to hold on to their homes. Instead, they joined the military or tried to find work in a teen labor force, which has a 24% unemployment rate. Others go to college by borrowing heavily. They graduate, they move back home, taking a low-paying job. As young people, they should be filled with hope and optimism. Instead, they confront limited job opportunities, reduced standard of living, and mountains of student debt. More, government paying $15 billion on Citigroup bailout. Their lives, like so many across the country, are improving only after years of personal struggle. Protecting them from another crisis should be the regulator's highest priority. Some say that people who participated in the bailouts 5 years ago, and I was one, are heroes because we saved the system. But I don't take heroism to throw I don't think it's heroism to throw trillions of government cash at big financial institutions. The true heroes are those regulators who can show the courage. You should say those regulators and members of the judiciary who can not just show the courage, just apply the law the way it was supposed to be applied, the way it says. You need apply those regulators who can show the courage to tame the system against fierce lobbying of the very institutions that benefited from the government largesse. As the Lehman bankruptcy assumes its place in the annals of our financial history, it saddens me to think how historians will characterize the timid reform efforts that followed so far. When Dodd-Frank financial reform law barely one-third implemented, regulators still have the opportunity to make post-Lehman era their finest hour. I hope they use that for their occasion. Now, I want to talk about the judiciary's role in this because for so long we were ridiculed. From the very beginning, we were ridiculed. In Cook County, the judges attempted to intimidate us. They would insult us. They would be rude, and they would laugh at us, belittle us. And as it turns out, around the country, well, we were right, and you were wrong. And you were wrong not because you misunderstood the law or because you're bad. You were wrong because you wouldn't listen to the truth. Because the truth will, you always got to base your justice system on the truth. You can never sacrifice justice on the altar of expediency. I don't care if you got 1 million cases on your docket, you decide each one based on the truth. That wasn't done always. And those judges are going to have a legacy that is theirs. And those who
it'll be discussed
decide, it'll be discussed for generations. That will be building and
join the discussion.
For the most part, the judiciary is onto it and doing a very fine job. There are exceptions, and the exceptions are where they always are.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Lou Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back. This is our final segment. We've only got about 3 minutes, and I want to end on a positive note because, you know, all of this about the banks and everything, I don't want you to be discouraged because there's a movement around the country that's going to bring the balance back, as the song says, the Battle of Evermore. Bring the balance back. And I want to end with reading from Paul Newman as Frank Galvin in the movie The Verdict. Because, you know, this is all about the truth versus the lies. And we have to have a justice system based on the truth. And we cannot have banks that are lying to the courts and to the public and to the regulators and committing crimes. Thomas Jefferson warned us. Frank Galvin in the movie The Verdict, which I encourage you all to see, he got up to give his summation in a case that appeared lost because the judge had denied him so many, made so many rulings against him, and very much, and it looked like everything was lost. So Paul Newman gets up and says, you know, so much of the time we are lost. We say, please, God, tell us what is right. Tell us what is true. There is no justice. The rich win. The poor are powerless. We become tired of hearing the lie. And after a time, we become dead. We think of ourselves as victims, and we become victims. We become weak. We doubt ourselves. We doubt our beliefs. We doubt our institutions, and we doubt the law. But today, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are the law. You are the law, not some book, not the lawyers, not the marble statue or the trappings of the court. You see, these are just symbols of our desire to be truthful and just. They are, in fact, a prayer, a fervent but frightened prayer. In my religion, they say, act as if ye had faith, and faith will be given to you. If we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe within ourselves and act with justice. See, I believe there is justice in our hearts. And it's always good to stir the pot once in a while, I think. And we have a situation that is coming to light in this country about a very, very small group of people, 1/10 of 1%, that live in these, $30, $40 million mansions. Sam Fuld, they had the 5-year fall of Lehman Brothers. He didn't hurt. He doesn't suffer. He's still got a home, a $75 million estate in the Hamptons.
I hope he can afford a cleaning lady.
We're going to, American people, as long as time we base our the truth, things will be all right. The truth coming out will be all right. There's going to be a lot of changes, and a lot of institutions are going to fall and be held liable for their conduct and the consequences of their wrongful acts. And the American people will come out ahead if they just have trust and faith in themselves and act with justice. And that's all we're asking. The truth, justice based on the truth, and everything will be all right. I'm Lou Brydges and Mike Lane, and thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you join us again next week.
And please join the discussion at facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y. Give us a call, 224-513-1231, 224-513-1231.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show with attorney Lou Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal. Tune into AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about foreclosure.